Nobody thought Canada would push back so aggressively, but they did. And Trump? He hit back even harder. Tariffs soared, businesses panicked, and global markets shook. What started as a trade dispute had turned into an all-out economic war, and neither side was backing down. Then came Trump's next move, a decision so bold, so unexpected, that it changed everything. This wasn't just about trade anymore. It was about power, control, and who would break first. And with economic fallout spreading fast, one question remained. How far was Trump willing to go? Imagine waking up to find that everything, from the steel in your car to the can holding your favorite soda, just got more expensive. That's exactly what happened when Trump imposed tariffs of 25% on Canadian and Mexican imports and 10% on Chinese goods. But this wasn't just about economics. It was a strategic move, a statement of power in an escalating trade war. Wall Street felt the shock. Businesses scrambled. The world realized something much bigger was unfolding. But here's what most people don't see. Tariffs aren't just about money. They're political weapons, pressure tactics, and Trump knew exactly where to strike. Canada, a long-standing ally, was suddenly treated like an adversary. Mexico, a key trade player, was caught in the crossfire. And China? Well, that battle was already brewing. But there's one thing about economic warfare. No one takes a hit without hitting back. And when you corner global powers, you can expect retaliation. The effects were immediate. Prices surged. Industries dependent on imports started panicking. Supply chains, the invisible backbone of global commerce, began to crack. American farmers, once thriving in international markets, suddenly saw their goods stuck in the crossfire. The real economic impact? Instability. And instability is what sends investors running and governments in a crisis mode. But this wasn't just about economics anymore. This was about power, leverage, and who would make the next move. Then, boom, Canada struck back. A counterstrike so calculated and swift, it hit the U.S. where it hurt the most, its economy. But this is just the beginning. The real game is about to unfold, where high-stakes decisions will shape the future of global power. Want to understand how this trade war could impact your life? Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and uncover the facts no one is telling you. History waits for no one. Neither should you. If the U.S. thought Canada would take this sitting down, they were dead wrong. In a move as swift as it was strategic, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced retaliation, matching Trump's 25% tariffs with his own. The target? Over $106 billion worth of American goods, hitting industries that mattered. This wasn't just about money. It was about sending a message. Canada wasn't just reacting. It was making it clear that economic aggression would be met with equal force. And Trudeau didn't just stop at the tariffs. He framed the move as a defense of Canadian sovereignty, a stand against unfair trade policies. Suddenly, Canada wasn't just America's quiet neighbor. It was a player in the global trade war. Public sentiment surged. Canadians, usually diplomatic, were now rallying behind their leader, ready to back their country in this economic showdown. And behind closed doors, U.S. businesses were getting nervous. The cost of retaliation was about to hit home. Supply chains, long optimized for smooth North American trade, were now in chaos. American manufacturers relying on Canadian materials saw costs spike. Small businesses that depended on cross-border commerce started feeling the pressure. And let's not forget the consumers. Higher prices. The economic impact wasn't just a hypothetical situation. It was real, and it was growing. And the worst part? The uncertainty was just getting started. But here's where things get even more interesting. Canada's counterstrike wasn't the only storm on the horizon. With Mexico and China watching closely, the domino effect was inevitable. More tariffs, more disruption, and deeper diplomatic tensions. The stage was set for a full-scale trade battle. And if anyone thought Canada's response was the final move, they were about to be proven very, very wrong. The moment Canada retaliated, the world knew this wasn't just a U.S.-Canada dispute. It was a spark in a powder keg. Mexico wasted no time, announcing its own tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting industries that would feel the most pain. Meanwhile, China, already locked in a high-stakes trade war with Washington, saw an opportunity. Beijing escalated its legal battle at the World Trade Organization, framing the U.S. as the aggressor. This wasn't just about trade anymore. It was about global economic power, and everyone was choosing sides. But here's the kicker. These weren't just reactionary moves. Each country had a strategy, a calculated response meant to maximize damage while minimizing self-inflicted wounds. Mexico aimed at American agriculture, knowing farmers were a key part of Trump's voter base. China, on the other hand, focused on supply chains, targeting key components that U.S. manufacturers couldn't easily replace. This was chess, not checkers, and every move carried long-term consequences. Markets felt the heat immediately. Stock prices dipped, businesses panicked, and economists warned of a cascading economic impact. Companies that had relied on decades of free trade suddenly found themselves stuck between rising costs and uncertain policies. The pressure wasn't just on governments, it was on corporations, investors, and everyday consumers who were about to pay the price. And as these diplomatic tensions escalated, one question loomed large. How far would this go before someone backed down? And that's exactly why you need to stay ahead of the curve. This isn't just about economics. It's about power, influence, and the future of global leadership. Want to know how this high-stakes battle could shape your world? Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and don't miss what happens next. Because trust me, this is far from over. Canada's federal retaliation was just the beginning. As tensions escalated, Canadian provinces took matters into their own hands. Ontario, British Columbia, Nova Scotia, and Quebec rolled out their own tariffs and boycotts on U.S. products, hitting American alcohol, tech, and transportation industries. This wasn't just economic policy, it was personal. U.S. businesses that once thrived on Canadian consumers suddenly found their goods collecting dust on store shelves. The trade war was no longer just between governments. It was now woven into everyday life. And Canadians weren't just following orders. They embraced the retaliation with enthusiasm. Bars in Toronto swapped out American whiskey for homegrown brands. Tech companies in Vancouver looked for European and Asian alternatives to U.S. software. Even public transit contracts started favoring local or non-American manufacturers. The message was clear. If the U.S. wanted to play hardball with tariffs, Canada was ready to fight back with its own economic weapons. But what happens when economic retaliation goes beyond just policy? The economic impact of these provincial moves rippled across industries. U.S. exporters suddenly faced unexpected losses in key markets. American tech firms, already under pressure from global competitors, now had another obstacle. And let's not forget U.S. alcohol producers. What was once a reliable revenue stream in Canadian bars and restaurants had just evaporated. Every province's decision compounded the damage, creating a growing crisis that Washington hadn't anticipated. And with each new retaliation, the divide between the two nations deepened. And this was just the start. As U.S. businesses struggled to navigate these new restrictions, the White House found itself cornered, needing to respond. But instead of dialing things down, Trump took an even bolder step, one that would ignite controversy like never before. Want to know how far this fight went? Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and prepare for the next shocking news. When the tariffs first hit, politicians framed them as a way to protect national interests. But in reality, the consequences were immediate and brutal. Businesses that relied on cross-border trade found themselves drowning in higher costs. Factories slowed down, supply chains buckled, and consumer prices started creeping up. What was once a well-oiled machine of North American commerce was now clogged with uncertainty, delays, and skyrocketing expenses. And the worst part? This was just the beginning. Take the auto industry, for example, a sector that depends on raw materials and precision-timed logistics across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. With steel and aluminum now subject to tariffs, costs surged overnight. Manufacturers had to decide, absorb the losses or pass them to consumers. Spoiler alert, they passed them on. Suddenly, buying a new car got even pricier. Inflation crept in, and as uncertainty grew, businesses weren't just struggling to keep up. They were halting investments altogether. And it wasn't just cars. Everything from groceries to household appliances became collateral damage. Companies that once relied on supply chains spanning North America had to rethink their entire operations. Some looked to other countries for sourcing, while others simply cut jobs to stay afloat. The economic impact was impossible to ignore. Inflation surged, consumer confidence dipped, and industries once thriving under free trade now faced their toughest challenge yet. But here's what no one saw coming. This wasn't just an economic crisis. It was a political one, too. Because when businesses suffer, so do governments. Angry voters started demanding answers, and pressure mounted on leaders to de-escalate the crisis. But instead of backing down, Trump doubled down, reviving an idea so controversial it sent shockwaves through Canada. What if the answer to this whole mess wasn't just better trade deals, but a complete statehood shift? Sounds crazy? Just wait until you see what happened next. Just when things couldn't get more heated, Trump did what he does best. He threw gasoline on the fire. In a move that blindsided both allies and critics, he casually revived an old, almost forgotten notion: statehood for Canada. Yes, you heard that right. In the middle of an escalating trade war, Trump floated the idea that maybe, just maybe, the simplest solution was for Canada to become the 51st state of the United States. It was a statement so bold, so outrageous, that it instantly sent shockwaves across both nations. For Canadians, this wasn't just an offhand remark. It was an insult. National identity is woven deep into Canada's political fabric, and the mere suggestion of merging with the U.S. struck a nerve. Politicians across the spectrum, from conservative to liberal, immediately condemned the idea. Trudeau dismissed it outright. Social media exploded with a mix of outrage and mockery. The idea of giving up independence in the middle of an economic impact crisis? Unthinkable. But here's what many missed. Trump wasn't just stirring the pot for no reason. His comments weren't random, they were strategic. By framing statehood as an option, he was shifting the conversation, making Canada seem like the weaker player in the trade dispute. It was psychological warfare, designed to put pressure on the universal. Whether you believed in it or not, the remark served its purpose. It kept everyone talking. Meanwhile, real issues, like rising tariffs, broken supply chains, and economic instability, took a back seat to the controversy. And in the chaos, Washington gained the upper hand. But Canada wasn't going to let this slide. If Trump thought he could rattle the country into submission, he was in for a surprise. The backlash wasn't just political. It was economic, diplomatic, and deeply personal. And as analysts began crunching the numbers, they uncovered a reality that no one in Washington wanted to admit. The U.S. economy wasn't untouchable. In fact, it was about to take a hit that even the White House couldn't ignore. The tariffs were meant to boost the U.S. economy, but reality hit hard. Prices soared, investment slowed, and businesses struggled. With rising costs on imported goods, companies had no choice but to pass expenses onto consumers. Inflation spiked, and suddenly, everyday essentials became more expensive. The economic impact spread fast, making it clear that this trade war wasn't just hurting foreign nations. It was hitting Americans where it hurt the most: their wallets. Analysts quickly rang the alarm. Economic forecasts painted a grim picture. Business confidence plummeted, and GDP projections took a 1.2% hit. The auto, tech, and agricultural sectors faced serious losses, while supply chains strained under the pressure. Once stable trade relationships had turned into high-stakes gambles, leaving industries scrambling to find new partners. But the damage wasn't just economic, it was political too. With elections looming, the backlash was impossible to ignore. Farmers in the Midwest, once staunch Trump supporters, felt betrayed as foreign markets closed off. Manufacturing jobs, supposedly protected by tariffs, saw unexpected layoffs. Meanwhile, Canada, China, and Mexico dug in deeper, showing no signs of backing down. The retaliation was working, and the White House was running out of easy answers. But beyond numbers and trade deals, a larger crisis was unfolding, one that no tariff or policy shift could easily fix. The once solid relationship between the U.S. and its closest allies was beginning to crack. And when diplomatic trust starts to break, the consequences go far beyond economics. This wasn't just about tariffs, it was about power and control. What started as a trade dispute turned into an economic war with real consequences. Higher prices, broken supply chains, and crumbling alliances. And while leaders made their moves, everyday people paid the price. But here's what most won't realize: this was never just about trade. It was a battle for global dominance with ripple effects that still shape economies today. Those who understand these shifts stay ahead. The rest? They get left behind. And this? It's just one piece of a much bigger game. Want to know what happens next? Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and don't miss the next power move.